Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking into a specific year, 1977, for the artist Bob Camblin.
It's a great way to focus, isn't it? Zeroing in on one year.
Exactly. And we've got quite a bit to work with: gallery records, some really sharp exhibition reviews, especially from the Houston tapers, and Camblin's own words, his quotes and reflections.
That combination is key, the external view and the internal voice.
Right. So our mission really is to see if 1977 was, a turning point for him, looking at his shows, travels, who he worked with, and how his ideas about art might have been changing.
Yeah, piecing together that puzzle from these different fragments. It's like art detective work.
I like that. Okay, so let's start at the beginning of the year. It seems Camblin was already represented by Moody Gallery.
Which is significant. Moody was and is a respected gallery.
And they were already planning a solo show for him later in the year. What does that established connection tell us?
Well, it suggests a solid professional footing. The gallery has confidence in him. They're invested. It provides stability, a platform.
Allows him to focus on the work, maybe.
Precisely. And knowing a solo show is coming up gives a target an incentive to produce.
And produce he did. Our sources say he was in 7 shows throughout 1977.
7. Wow. That's busy.
It seems like a lot, doesn't it? What does that level of activity suggest?
It points to someone who's really active, getting their work out there. Not just the solo show, but group exhibitions too. It implies momentum.
Engaged with the scene.
Definitely. And likely had a good body of work ready to show.
Then in May, something interesting happens, a commission for a large oil painting from Kuwait.
Okay, that's a different direction. International and a large oil.
Yeah. How might that impact an artist like Camblin at that time, beyond just, the scale?
Well, first, it's international recognition, which is always a boost. But working on a large commission, especially oil, might push his technique, his subject matter maybe.
A different kind of pressure, perhaps? Client expectations?
Could be. Or just the challenge of working large after maybe focusing on smaller, detailed pieces. It often forces a change in approach.
Okay, moving into June. There's this collaborative printmaking show at Moody, Little Egypt Enterprises. 13 artists.
Ah, Little Egypt. That was his printmaking venture, right?
Seems so. And the process described sounds incredibly intense. Working with Folkman, 10 plates used for each of 4 prints, taking over a year.
10 plates per print. That's astonishingly complex for lithography or etching, layer upon layer upon layer.
What does that tell you, that level of dedication to a single print?
It speaks volumes about his commitment to the medium, the craft, a deep dive into the possibilities of layering color, texture, image. Almost obsessive in a way.
Suggests process was really important.
Hugely important.
Yeah.
And that intense focus in printmaking might feed back into his other work too, how he thinks about composition, detail.
Then fast forward just a couple of months to August, and he's back at Moody Gallery again.
Another show already.
Yeah, this time a 3-person exhibition. The Houston Chronicle Review headline even said, Camblin's new work sparks Moody show.
So Moody's really showcasing him consistently through the year.
It seems that way. What does that reinforce for you?
It reinforces that he was productive, that the gallery saw his work as vital, interesting, something audiences needed to see. He wasn't just a one-show-a-year artist for them at that point.
Now, September gets a bit murky. There's a mention on his resume of him reaching a class at the University of Houston.
Reaching a class? That's odd phrasing.
It is. And apparently the art department couldn't confirm it. Any thoughts on what that might mean?
Could be anything, really.
Yeah.
A guest lecture that wasn't formally documented, a workshop that fell through, maybe just a slightly optimistic resume padding. It's hard to say.
Adds a little bit of mystery, I suppose.
Or maybe reflects his somewhat elusive persona at times.
Also in September, he travels out to California, San Jose to visit Joe Tate.
Ah, Joe Tate, another important collaborator later on.
Right, with the holding firm. So this visit seems like it could be significant, laying groundwork.
Very likely. Artists connecting, sharing ideas. These trips can spark collaborations years down the line. Networking, but also creative cross-pollination.
And around this time, the Chronicle mentions his upcoming November Moody show as one to watch, building anticipation.
Good press to have. Sets the stage for his big solo exhibition.
Before that, though, September, October, he's also in a couple of group shows. One at the Blaffer Gallery at U of H, and another focusing on printmakers at Editions Gallery.
Okay, so being seen in different contexts. University Gallery, a commercial gallery focused on prints.
What does that tell us about how his work was being positioned?
It shows his work fit into different narratives. The Houston scene via the Blaffer Show, but also within a broader context of American and European printmaking. It suggests versatility, or at least that curators saw him fitting into these different dialogues.
Then there's a really unique item from October, a trade agreement.
A trade for art.
Yeah, he traded a watercolor, Venice, 1977, to a company for $1,000 worth of meals at their private club, Chow.
Wow. Okay, that's fascinating. $1,000 in meals in 1977 was quite a bit.
It certainly wasn't trivial. What does that kind of barter tell you?
It's a great snapshot of the practicalities, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was art having direct, tangible value outside of just cash sales.
Yeah.
And maybe speaks to Camblin's connections, his resourcefulness in making his way as an artist. Pretty unique arrangement.
Okay, which brings us to the big event of the year, it seems. His solo show at Moody in November-December. Complete Works. Bob Camblin in collaboration with the Anonymous Box Company.
Quite a title. And the Anonymous Box Company again.
Intriguing.
And the invitations were something else. 3 different versions, each with a unique postcard he made, plus a separate color invitation.
That's elaborate. That's not just an announcement. That's part of the art piece itself, in a way.
What does that suggest about his approach to this show?
It suggests a really conceptual approach, thinking about the whole experience for the viewer right from the mailbox. It sets a tone, playful, maybe a bit mysterious, definitely not standard.
And speaking of not standard, his appearance at the opening.
Ah, yes, the famous Mr. Peanut incident. He showed up dressed as Mr. Peanut, apparently stayed in character the entire evening, complete with costume.
Which is just brilliant in a way.
Yeah.
Performance art meets gallery opening. It completely shifts the focus, makes you question the artist's role, the nature of persona.
How does that performance element change how we might see Camblin?
It reveals this whole other dimension, right? Playful, provocative, maybe challenging the seriousness of the art world. It suggests he wasn't just contained within the frame of the canvas.
So what about the work itself in that show? Patricia Johnson's review mentioned magic and metaphysics.
Okay, so themes we associate with him: the mystical, the thoughtful.
But Mimi Crossley's review in the Houston Post really dug into a shift she saw. She talked about him moving away from those super detailed watercolors.
Right, the ones sometimes done with a magnifying glass full of tiny details. Ghostwriting.
Exactly. Moving away from that towards larger canvases. Leaner, she called them. And she even brings up Cézanne and Monet.
That's a significant observation, Cézanne and Monet suggest. Impressionistic concerns. Light, color, maybe a looser brushstroke. A move towards capturing sensation rather than intricate detail.
What strikes you most about that reported change?
It sounds like a major pivot, exploring the language of paint on a larger scale, possibly influenced by modern masters. It suggests a real period of questioning, of experimentation, trying something new.
But interestingly, Crossley also says that even in these new, looser paintings, the Camblin stories were still there.
Ah, okay. So the style changes, but the content, the core obsessions, remain.
Seems like it. She mentions hidden animals, secret places, travels to magical lands, postcards tacked onto the picture plane, even painting in Earl Staley's backyard. And she brings up his long-running fascination with a magic garden scene.
That's fascinating. It suggests the underlying narrative drive is constant, even as the visual language evolves. The what remains, but the how is changing. That magic garden motif keeps topping up.
However, Crossley doesn't just praise the new work. She notes a lack of sureness about what happens on a large scale.
An honest critique.
Yeah. And that maybe there were issues with illusion, flatness, and how white space can just get away from you. She even suggests this shift might be an effort to loosen up.
That sounds like a very perceptive take on an artist in transition. It's often the case when painters scale up or change styles. There's an awkward phase, a learning curve. The lack of sureness feels real.
Trying to break free, maybe?
Possibly. Trying to find a new freedom, a new way of working that maybe the intricate detail didn't allow anymore. But it's not always a smooth path. Crossley captures that sense of promise, but also the struggle.
And this show got noticed beyond Houston, too, with a mention in Texas monthlies around the state.
Good statewide visibility, then.
So beyond that big solo show, there were a couple of other exhibitions we don't have exact dates for in '77. One with Moody Gallery artists traveling to Waco.
Standard gallery activities showing their artists elsewhere.
And another interesting one. His work was included in a show drawn from the collection of the Junior Service League of Longview. But the curious detail is that in the catalog, Camblin was apparently the only artist listed without any biographical information.
Really, just his name and the work. That is odd.
Any idea why that might be?
Could be a simple clerical error by the organizers.
Or
Maybe intentional. Part of that anonymous box company, Robin Goodfellow persona, preferring the work to speak entirely for itself. It's another little piece of the Camblin enigma.
speaking of persona, we also see him donating a print to a Channel 8 TV auction.
Engaging with the local community, giving back.
And there's a note about his signature changing for something called red stick, from a skull and crossbones to 2 circles and 4 vertical lines.
Even the signature is evolving. That's
Yeah.
interesting, like a logo changing. Perhaps the meaning of red stick, whatever that represented for him, shifted.
And that wasn't his only signature that year. He used several others, right?
Yes, the documents mention anonymous box, KS, Robin Goodfellow, old paint, different versions of the red stick flag.
It really emphasizes this idea of him having multiple artistic identities, doesn't it? Almost like characters he could inhabit.
Absolutely. A sense of playfulness, maybe exploring different facets of himself or his art through these different names, resisting being pinned down.
And amidst all the painting experimentation, he didn't abandon printmaking.
No, definitely not.
He completed more work with Little Egypt enterprises like Glass Birdcage and Summer, using lithography and silkscreen.
Right. So that intensive print work continued alongside the shift in his painting. It suggests printmaking remained a core part of his practice, maybe a space for different kinds of exploration than the large canvases offered.
And then there's the collaboration as The Holding Firm.
With Earl Staley and Joe Tate, yes.
They worked on Bestiary, a series of 6 lithographs. Fantastical animal prints.
I've seen images of those. Really wild stuff.
The description says the style was similar to an earlier flyer they did, with almost all the space filled with intricate graphics. A vulture, alligator, walrus, anteater, bat, a strange dog-like thing.
Very imaginative, almost overloaded with detail, which is interesting given the simultaneous move towards leaner canvases in his solo work. It highlights that collaborative energy, maybe pushing each other into this very dense graphic style for that project.
So we have all this activity, these shifts, these collaborations, and we also have Camblin's own words from around this time, his quotes.
Which can give us clues to his thinking.
Definitely. He talks about being interested in the balance between science and magic, finding that intensely bright gray. Does that resonate with what we're seeing in 1977?
I think it really does. That space between the rational, maybe the technique, and the intuitive or magical, the content.
Yeah.
This year seems full of him navigating that gray area, the shift in style, the performance, the multiple identities.
He also wrote about needing to step off the train of thought to find power, true laughter.
Stepping off the train of thought.
Yeah. Does that connect maybe to loosening up his painting style or even showing up as Mr. Peanut, getting off the conventional track?
Oh, absolutely. That quote feels like a perfect fit for trying to break established habits, whether in painting technique or in how an artist presents themselves. Finding power outside the expected path. The Mr. Peanut persona is definitely off the train tracks.
And his focus on seeing versus just looking. How does that fit?
Well, that's fundamental for an artist, isn't it? But emphasizing it during a time of stylistic change suggests he might be consciously trying to perceive the world, or his subjects, differently, to really see them in a new way that necessitates a new way of painting them.
So wrapping this up, looking back at 1977 through all these lenses, it really does feel like a significant year.
It certainly seems packed. Consistent exhibitions, the International Commission, clear experimentation, and a shift in his painting, ongoing printmaking collaborations, the performative aspect.
And this exploration of identity through signatures and personas.
Exactly. It feels very much like a year of transition. He's building on his past work, but also actively pushing into new territory, even if, as Crossley noted, he hadn't quite mastered it yet. But the seeds of future directions seem to be sown here.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How looking closely at one year like this illuminates the whole artistic process, that push and pull between the artist's own ideas and, well, the practicalities and influences of the art world around them.
And you wonder, what can we take from Camblin's 1977? Those challenges of changing style, of balancing personal vision with public presentation, collaboration versus solo work. These are things artists still grapple with today, just in a different context.
That constant negotiation. It's a fascinating look at how one artist navigated it. His experiences then might offer a lens for understanding the pressures and possibilities for artists now.
It really underscores the dynamic nature of a creative career. It's rarely a straight line. Camblin 77 shows that clearly the exploration, the uncertainty, the breakthroughs,
Well, if this deep dive into Bob Camblin's 1977 has intrigued you, his work and writings definitely reward further exploration. There's a lot there. Thanks for joining us.